Tonight, confronted for the first time since his downfall, Sky News quizzes Lord Mandelson on his links to Jeffrey Epstein that led him to lose his job in Washington.
Lord Mandelson, sir, did you tell Keir Starmer everything about the nature of your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
The former US ambassador keeps his silence, but questions remain about who will replace him and whether there will be moves to strip him of his peerage. Also tonight, as Hurricane Melissa makes landfall in Jamaica, the Foreign Secretary announces support for British nationals in the region. We'll have the very latest throughout the hour. Also, a headache for the Chancellor as the economic forecasts take a turn for the worse. We'll find out for the first time who the Treasury considers to be working people as Rachel Reeves works out how to fill in that multi-billion-pound black hole. The government says it's planning to use military bases to house asylum seekers. But can the plan overcome the power of the NIMBY in Parliament and in the areas affected?
Hello, dear. Just going to...
And as tributes are paid to the actress Prunella Scales after her death, aged 93, we'll look back at when she was on the opposite side of the political divide from her Fawlty Towers husband, John Cleese. Well, all that and more with Kwasi Kwarteng and just Christine Jardine, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday. I'm Darren McCaffrey, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. A very good evening. We're going to start tonight with Sky News questioning of Lord Mandelson for the first time since he was sacked as the US ambassador. It follows, of course, increased scrutiny over his relationship with the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. He's kept a pretty low profile since he left his post, only days before Donald Trump's state visit to the UK last month. His role in Washington has still not been filled, and his role as a peer in the House of Lords has been called into question, with voices across the political spectrum calling for it to be removed. Well, he's currently on a leave of absence. We'll discuss that in a moment, but first, let's have a look at our exclusive encounter with Lord Mandelson, who, let's be honest about this, didn't seem terribly happy and remained rather tight-lipped.
Lord Mandelson, sir, did you tell Keir Starmer everything about the nature of your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Was there full disclosure about your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein before you were appointed ambassador? Did you tell Keir Starmer everything? Did you leave anything out? So can you clear up for us, how many times did you visit Jeffrey Epstein? How many times did you visit him, sir? Sir, who are the friends you referred to in your birthday message to Epstein in his birthday book? So are you going to release all the correspondence between you and Jeffrey Epstein? Lord Mandelson, these are important matters, sir. Are you going to release the correspondence? Was Keir Starmer aware?
Really didn't want to say anything, did he? Let's speak to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's with me. And John, definitely very tight-lipped.
Well, Mandy, as we call him, although he always said that was homophobic. Mandelson, the Prince of Darkness, the supreme great spin doctor, how not to conduct a doorstep. If you're doorstepped by the likes of you and me, be polite, say good evening, be friendly, and then say, thank you very much, but I really haven't got anything to add to what I've said previously, blah, blah, blah. Be nice. He looks furtive, he looks shifty. And talk about how the mighty have fallen. I mean, he got into a car which had the engine sounded a bit croaky, didn't it? And, you know, he's used to being driven around in limos. He used to be, not that long ago, he was in the White House with Donald Trump. You know, he's the man who likes the high life, the oligarchs, yachts, all that sort of stuff. And there he is, looking shifty and furtive at a provincial railway station, like some sort of fugitive. And
there are all big questions, though, John, aren't there, just briefly about his role in the House of Lords and, indeed, who may well fill this position in DC?
Well, I think the Prime Minister will go for a career diplomat this time. Very rarely that political appointments are made. One thinks of Peter Jay, who was, let me get this right, was it Joe? I think he was James Callaghan's son-in-law, wasn't he? Margaret Jay was his Callaghan's daughter. And now this one. I mean, we know that the Prime Minister was warned by the security services that there were risks and they were ignored. And I remember Peter Kyle appearing on the Sunday morning on Sky News with Trevor Phillips a few weeks back. He was worth the risk. That was the government's view. It turned out to be a crazy appointment. Let's not forget, this is someone who had to resign from the cabinet twice. First of all, over a loan he didn't declare to his building society. He was lent money for a mortgage by Geoffrey Robinson, who was the Paymaster General, known as the Paymaster Generous in those days. And then, of course, a passport application when he came back and he was Northern Ireland Secretary. And he had to quit again.
And so, yeah, he's definitely had a very colourful political career, but it's definitely, I think it's fair to say, John, over at the moment.
He said famously in 2001, I'm a fighter, not a quitter, and then he quit to go to Brussels. And then the Prime Minister said there's no way back for him. I mean, he's in disgrace now. He'll go off and make some money, no doubt, lecture tours and business deals and so on. But his career in public service is over.
OK, well, let's get the view of our panel tonight. That is Kwasi Kwarteng, of course, the former Chancellor, and the Liberal Democrat MP, Christine Jardine, who is with me. I think it's fair to say, John, maybe not the biggest fan there of Lord Mandelson. What do you guys, though, think of that kind of doorstep, as we call it in the business? But ultimately, I mean, these things are difficult sometimes for politicians, but it reflects, I think, a man who seemed a little bit broken, dare I say.
Yeah, he looked, dare I say, humiliated. But I think John is being very severe. I mean, yes, he could have said, good evening, but you would have continued to question him, and he would have had nothing to say. And he would have just, the picture would have been of him walking back to his rather creaky car. So I don't think it's a kind of lose-lose situation for him. He probably should have smiled and looked slightly happier, and maybe nodded to you. But it's a very difficult situation to be in. I mean, I've been there myself. Yeah. And what do you do? I mean, you can say things, but then you're being drawn into conversations that you might not want to have, or you say nothing, which looks, as John suggested, furtive and shifty. So it's a lose-lose situation.
He has got himself in this situation, we must say.
Sure.
But, Christine, what about this idea of his peerage, whether Lord Mandelson should go back to being just old Peter Mandelson?
Well, I think there are still an awful lot of questions which have to be answered about his relationship with Epstein and his correspondence and what exactly the government knew and what he didn't tell them. And I think it does raise the questions of what do we do with people who get peerages? And then, I mean, he's not the only example. We have Michelle Mone as well at the centre of a controversy. What do we do with people who get peerages and then get involved in a scandal, a criminal offence or whatever? How do we then revoke that honour? And I think it's an issue that we have to look at.
And who makes that judgment call as well?
Yeah, and we have to look at some equivalent of the ministerial code for peers, and when they break it, then they could lose their peerage, because at the moment
there is no process. Kwasi, just on this idea about who should replace him, because our relationship with the United States is pretty important, and currently at the moment we do not have an ambassador.
Yes, I mean, I'm very surprised that an appointment hasn't been made. There have been suggestions that Karen Pierce should be extended an extra year. I think she's a very well-regarded, highly respected career diplomat. But it's very strange that we haven't replaced Peter Mandelson. And on this issue of peerage, I mean, I think the Lady Mone, Baroness Mone situation is slightly different, because she's on the hook for 122 million, which she hasn't paid the British government. Mandelson is in a slightly different position. I'm not condoning his behaviour. I think his relationship with Epstein was inappropriate. But
it's a different ball game.
It's a different ball game to the one that she's in, where she's actually being asked to pay money which she hasn't paid back. OK, we're going to have to move on, but thank you for the moment, guys. And thank you, John Craig, as well. Looking at Peter Mandelson there, not looking terribly happy when Sky News spoke to him a little earlier. Well, let's
Return to another major news story today, away from politics here in the UK, and that, of course, is the latest on Hurricane Melissa, which has made landfall in Jamaica. It is the strongest storm ever to have hit the island, packing winds of up to 185 miles per hour. Well, these are the live pictures from Kingston Harbour in Jamaica. Thousands in the storm's path have been urged to evacuate, with authorities warning of a potentially catastrophic damage. Frankly, as you can see, the camera is shaking there. That is meant to be the harbour. You can't really make out very much given how strong those winds are. The Red Cross expects up to 1.5 million people to be directly affected by this storm. And these are the scenes in the centre of the capital, Kingston. The hurricane's even stronger than Katrina, which of course slammed into New Orleans and killed some 1,300 people back in 2005. Back here, we've also heard from the Foreign Secretary, who said earlier today, there's the scene, from the centre of Kingston. Still some people out on the streets. The government have been telling people effectively to seek shelter, that this is a life-threatening storm, but there are also some people travelling around there. The streets are pretty empty tonight or in the afternoon there in Jamaica, given those wind speeds of up to 185 miles per hour. Well, we have heard from Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, talking about how the UK and the Foreign Office is prepared to provide assistance to British nationals in the region.
I spoke with the Jamaican Foreign Minister yesterday to offer the UK's full support and solidarity, and we are prepared to mobilise resources at their request. And the FCDO stands ready to help British nationals 24/7. We have set up the Crisis Centre in the Foreign Office, including with support from the MOD. And we are also positioning specialist rapid deployment teams to provide consular assistance to British nationals in the region. Any British nationals who are there should follow our travel advice and the advice of the Jamaican authorities. Melissa is forecast to impact Cuba next, and potentially the Turks and Caicos Islands and the Bahamas. Ministers have spoken with the governors of the overseas territories in the region, and we hope that these islands are spared significant damage. The UK government is also preparing to deliver humanitarian assistance to affected areas with a focus on meeting the immediate needs of those who are most vulnerable, and we send the people of Jamaica our support and solidarity today.
There's the Foreign Secretary speaking in the Commons earlier. Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner has sent this update from a health centre in Miami, Florida.
It is a monster, a generational disaster for the island of Jamaica. The wind speeds in the eye wall of that hurricane, 185 miles per hour, which is stronger even than the winds which drove Hurricane Katrina, which obviously devastated New Orleans back in 2005. I'm here at a donation drive in Miami home to a lot of Jamaican expats, the second largest Jamaican population in the United States after New York, and people here, volunteers boxing up non-perishable goods, things like beans, spaghetti, vegetables. They're packing up hygiene packs too, which have things like baby wipes in, deodorants, because really, people expecting there to be real problems for people in Jamaica getting hold of the things that they need to survive in the days and weeks to come. And that's where Michael Capone comes in. Michael, you're the founder of the Global Empowerment Mission. You've organised this donation drive. Just explain to me, this hurricane has made landfall in New Hope. What is that area like, and how gravely concerned are you for the people who live in that area?
Thank you. We operated since Hurricane Beryl, so I know that area very well. Where it made landfall last time was just literally a couple miles away, right, in Treasure Beach. So it's a very, wooden houses. It's by a river. The river will crest. You're going to have a three-pronged situation. You're going to have ocean water coming in from a surge. You got the 175 mile an hour winds that are going to wipe out everything. And then you got rivers that are going to overflow and turn into mudslides. This is just beginning to happen now. It just made landfall. So our organization has been preparing for this for almost a week now. We have teams already in Jamaica. We have warehouses in Jamaica. We have cargo planes that are land as soon as the airports are cleared. So we're doing everything we can. And you can learn more at gem.org. And we have a whole special fund for Hurricane Melissa.
And you were mentioning there Hurricane Beryl, which skirted the island of Jamaica last year. I was there. It was obviously nothing like the ferocity of Hurricane Melissa, but still it did fairly extensive damage there. You're in South Florida. You're no stranger to storms here. Have you ever seen anything that shaped up quite like Melissa?
I mean, there was Hurricane Dorian and Irma. I think they're comparable, even Katrina. It's catastrophic. I mean, when I landed after Hurricane Dorian on the shores of Marsh Harbor, it was just a wooden pile of rubble. There was nothing left standing. Even $20 million houses, you know, in wealthy neighborhoods, I walked to them in puddles of water and no windows. So, you know, this is a very, very serious situation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Michael. Michael Capone there, who's organised this donation drive, and they're hoping to get planes over to Jamaica, bringing these goods as soon as possible. But there are concerns that both of the major airports in Jamaica may be wiped out by this hurricane. As I say, it's just made landfall, but it is moving incredibly slowly. So it's not just the wind that people are worried about, it's the huge storm surge, the deluge of water, and the possibility of landslides, especially in those mountainous regions of Jamaica.
That's Martha Kellner there in Florida. But as you can see, that storm, the ice storm, just over Jamaica now. But clearly the situation is quite difficult on the ground. We've seen wind speeds of up to 185 miles per hour and potentially surges in terms of water of up to 4 metres. Some forecasters suggesting the worst is to come, in the sense of as that storm ripped through. We'll have the very latest, of course, on that situation in Jamaica and indeed the course of that hurricane and the effect it's having on that island throughout the evening here on Sky News. OK, let's return to politics here, though, and talk about the budget, because time and again we've been told by this Labour Party that they had one core mission.
We're going for growth in every part of our country.
We need to get economic growth. That is the number one mission of the government. Growth is our number one mission. What I will say is that growth is the number one priority of this government.
The Prime Minister and I have said loud and clear, economic growth is the number one mission of this government.
And then we also had the Prime Minister, who seemed to recognise this.
We can't just tax our way to growth. We need to ensure that we put in place the necessary measures. We're putting in place planning reforms, Mr. Speaker, to drive growth.
And yet, in less than a month, taxes will yet again rise in Rachel Reeves' second budget. Last year, it was primarily businesses that got clobbered with that massive hike in national insurance. This year, some more businesses will probably be hit again. I think the banks and the gambling companies will probably be easy targets for a Labour government, at least politically. But it also looks like those on higher incomes, those with wealth, will be squeezed too. Only those defined, we believe, as working people will be protected. Now, for a government facing a ballooning national debt, a downgrade in productivity and public services that are still struggling to function, hitting those with the broadest shoulders might not just seem like the most sensible thing to do, but the right thing to do too. But it then poses a question. Who exactly are working people? Well, Sky News today has obtained an internal Treasury definition. And apparently working people are those in the lowest 2/3 of the income scale, meaning, in theory, that people earning more than around £46,000 a year may not necessarily be, under Labour's definition, a working person. Now, the big question also is that really a lot of money? Are experienced teachers or police officers not working people who should be protected? Trained divers and chefs, nurses, maybe even your local builder and plumber. I'm sure it includes maybe even many of you watching this right now. Let's not forget that the top third of taxpayers already contribute over 80% of all income tax. Now, it seems unlikely that Labour is going to break its manifesto commitments, specifically on income tax and national insurance, but it does look likely that if you earn probably more than £45,000, you'll be more exposed to seeing your overall tax bill increase. And that poses some big questions. Is it sustainable? Is it really fair? No one's really claiming these are easy decisions for the government, but maybe just to remind you of that quote from the Prime Minister, you cannot just tax your way to growth. Well, the man who got hold of that internal document is our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who is with me in the studio, arms crossed, looking furtive, but ready to go. Good evening, Sam. You got hold of this document, and it gives an insight, doesn't it? A real insight into where the Treasury are less than a month from what's going to be a really crucial budget.
Look, for years, we've tried to work out what working people that Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves pledged to protect, who they are. And despite many, many attempts, Downing Street, number 11, sort of stonewall you officially, I've discovered that one working definition they're using in the Treasury is the lower two-thirds of incomes, which, as you rightly say, is people under £46,000, very, very roughly. And so I think we can expect those above that to be less protected than those before. This comes ahead of a budget in late November that I don't think people have really got their head around the sheer scale of it. They really, really haven't. There is going to be a massive event that's going to hit millions and millions of people at the back end of November. And I think a lot of people went through the election campaign thinking Labour wasn't promising to tax a great deal. They might have gone through last year's budget thinking, OK, well, that was a one-off for £40 billion of additional tax.
We were more than led to believe by the very government it was a kind of one-off.
And now they're going to come back for something in that order. Now, today, the Treasury has confirmed, I believe, that they are on course for quite a big productivity downgrade. Could be in the region of 10 to 20 billion pounds. Altogether, when you combine things that the government need to pay for, an expectation that growth is going to be lower in the long term, and the very tight fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves has set herself, there could be a black hole that needs to be filled almost entirely by tax at the end of November in the region, Darren, of 30 to 40 billion pounds. This is massive. And I don't even think here in Westminster people have got their heads around quite what that means. Now, the scale of tax that you can raise from higher earners is actually comparatively small. You get the big sums by taxing large numbers of people. And I think that once you put together the potential for people in higher rate bands, they might create a new council tax band, paying more on their houses, higher rate earners paying more, people in partnerships paying more. We're looking at not an enormous number of people potentially paying a lot more in tax. If a lot of the 30 billion they have to find is from that upper third, there is going to be quite the backlash from a government. I do wonder whether it even has the kind of democratic mandate to do it. There are those in the government, even today, that concede that the government hasn't explained why this big moment is happening to anything like as sufficiently as they should do, nor have they particularly alerted people to the scale of what's coming up. We can look at some polling figures now, and I think this is quite instructive.
Which also doesn't look great for the government, it must be said.
No, and if you look at the screen on my right, there are the numbers that are hovering into view. And what you can see is that whether it's the Green Party, the Liberal Democrats, or Reform, they're all pretty much of a muchness. Now, you'll see there that Labour are the least trusted on the economy, but only within the margin of error. Even populist parties are scoring pretty well when it comes to economic competence, economic handling. And that means that the argument that these people are making, sort of chancer arguments, which is something that both the Conservatives and the Labour Party want to make, is not landing with the public. I think there is quite a widespread concern here.
And what's incredible about that figure, when you look at Reform at 24%, is they self-admit they haven't even really got an economic policy at the moment.
And they're in the middle of sort of pivoting from something that involved a lot of spending to something a little bit more modest. And but already they're not lagging the other parties with their position. But this all comes back to late November and the budget. I think that there is going to be a shock to the system when this budget happens. I think that the country is not yet prepared for the scale of what is going to happen. And if, as I suspect, the base of people that are going to be targeted is relatively narrow, the amount that they have to pay is relatively more, and the shock and the unexpected nature of that is going to cause quite the backlash.
OK, Sam, for the moment, thank you very much indeed, because Sam's findings will almost certainly be discussed, as well as lots of other stories in tomorrow's papers. And, of course, we'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening here on Sky News. Joining us will be the broadcaster and commentator, Ali Miraj, and the broadcaster and journalist Sonia Soda. That's at 10:30 tonight. Well, joining me alongside Sam is Kwasi and Christine, as you can see. What's your take on all of this?
Look, I've sort of been there, as you know, and I think the problem the government did was that they failed to manage expectations. Many of us said last year that they would probably have to increase taxes for more than 1 year. They said that we got a 22 billion, it's important people remember the figures, the 22 billion black hole when they came in, that's what they said. The Tories contested that, we contested that, but even if you grant them the 22 billion black hole, they raised 40 billion in taxes last year, 40. And they said that it would be a one-off, as Sam suggested. They suggested that this was a way to stabilise after all the mayhem and chaos and all the rest of it of the Tories. And now, the black hole, having raised the 40 billion last year, the black hole this year is 30 billion. So they're going to have to raise, again, 30 billion, and they're going to have to, and I don't know what they're going to say. Are they going to say this is just another one-off? Are they going to say we won't do it again? Because the fear is that if we don't get growth next year, they'll do exactly the same thing next year. The black hole will be 30 billion, let's say, and then you're in this doom loop that Rachel Reeves herself alluded to, where you're just endlessly raising taxes.
Many would say that doom loop has been around for a while, and it started when you guys were in government.
Well, we tried to break out of it, and of course the markets reacted, and there was the mini-budget fallout. But it was clear that we were in a ratchet where we weren't getting any growth, and as your clip showed, that was their mission number one, to get growth. Now, without growth, you're on the path that we're on, which is where you're increasing taxes endlessly and getting minimal growth, and that's the doom loop.
Christine?
Well, it's fascinating listening to Kwasi, because I think we have to accept that they did inherit a mess from the Conservative government. Your government left them with a mess. Now, have they succeeded in overcoming that so far? No, I don't think they have, to the extent that any of us would have wanted to see. And I think in November, we do have to see something which begins to break out of this loop. We would like to see them do things like, a tax rather than income tax, a tax on the big the huge multi-billion social media companies, the platforms that are not paying enough tax, bigger digital taxes, things like that. But rebuild the other thing. Just to finish, Darren, the other thing that the Conservatives left us with, and Farage is to blame for this as well, is the fallout from Brexit. And that's the biggest single problem.
But they weren't talking about Brexit last year. They didn't talk about Brexit.
No, but we were, because Brexit has been a disaster for this country. And that is the other thing that they have to try and break out of.
Let me go back.
And to do that, we need to rebuild our relationships with the European Union and come up with a new customs union, because unless we do, we are stuck in this doom loop.
So look, let's go through the numbers again. They said 22 billion. We contested that. Let's give them that, 22 billion black hole. They raised 40 billion, almost twice as much as the black hole in taxes. And they said it was going to be a one-off to reset the economy. And they never mentioned Brexit at that time. And now they haven't got growth. And
they didn't mention it, though, I did.
You might have done, but the government didn't. And then now they've got a 30 billion black hole. And they're going to do exactly the same thing. They're going to raise taxes.
Because it's not just Rachel Reeves. I mean, it's the IFS, the OBR, it's the Bank of England who say Brexit is a drag on economic growth.
No, I think that if we adopted the right policies, there's no reason why we couldn't grow more. And you look at the countries in the EU, and you would make a strong case, if it was the circumstance that France and Germany were growing strongly. They're the two biggest economies in the EU. And they're not.
Greece
is
doing pretty well, Poland's doing pretty well, Ireland's doing pretty well. There's a lot of EU countries that are doing pretty well.
They're not doing great. And the economies,
with Brexit as well.
The economies that are comparable to us are France, Germany and Italy. And those countries aren't growing any faster than we are.
OK, just briefly, Sam, because we haven't got much time, this is all reflected, isn't it, in the polling figures out today, which Labour is at an all-time low.
That's right. And I think, given the scale of the budget that we're facing, it's going to be an incredibly challenging couple of months. I wonder whether the public are going to look at the budget and ask, where were we told about this and where did we vote for this? There are some in number 10 who think that they can point to the Office for Budget Responsibility and blame them for deciding to do a downgrade on Britain's growth right now. And I think it is extraordinary that can end up being the justification for what's about to hit the public in 6 weeks' time. can they really point to three wise men half a mile down the road from our studio here, sitting in the tower above the Ministry of Justice building, as being responsible for Britain's ills? There aren't arguments about why it's happening, what needs to be done. I think there's a big challenge.
OK, Sam, as always, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there joining us in the studio. OK, you're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Up next, more on those difficulties for the Chancellor as the budget looms. I'll get the thoughts of the head of the Trade Unions Congress and ask him what he makes of what working people actually are. Stay tuned.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back to the Politics Hub. No, just for the break, we were discussing that headache for the Chancellor as the economic forecasts have taken a turn yet again for the worse, and that all-important autumn budget looms in less than a month. Well, I got the thoughts of the TUC General Secretary, Paul Novak, and asked him what he made of the Treasury's definition of a working person. Have a watch. Paul, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News. First of all, yet more bad news for the UK economy. Our productivity downgraded yet again, and it wasn't good to begin with. Why are we so unproductive in this country?
Well, I think in part, Darren, it's the toxic legacy of 14 years of Conservative government that underinvested in our economy, underinvested in skills, didn't have a coherent industrial strategy. And as a result, we had not only stalling productivity, but falling living standards and wages. I think there are some deep-rooted problems alongside that. I mean, UK employers invest around about half the EU average in skills, and then we wonder why we can't get the skilled people we need, whether that's in social care or advanced manufacturing. And we've also had an economy, frankly, that's been very good at creating low-paid, insecure jobs, over 1 million people on zero-hours contracts. So I think we've tested that previous economic model to destruction, and really it is now time for the government to invest in skills.
But it doesn't. Well, it may well be time for the government to invest, but is that going to happen? I mean, the criticism, of course, is that Labour is still adhering to what's seen as Treasury orthodoxy in all of this.
Well, I think at last year's budget, the Chancellor set out record investments in our public services and in infrastructure. We now do have a a 10-year infrastructure pipeline, if you like, for major projects, whether they're nuclear power stations, upgrading the grid, 1.5 million new homes. I think it's really important as we look ahead to the budget that she stays the course on that investment because, frankly, we do need that modern industrial strategy. If you think about the government's intervention, for example, in British Steel, directly intervening to save thousands of jobs, that's key for the steel industry, but it's core for the UK economy as a whole because we know steel underpins so much more of our economy. So I think the government is on the right track. It's got to stay that course following the budget.
In saying that, one thing that it's definitely going to happen in the budget is we know that taxes are going to go up. Some of them seem quite obvious. Let's talk about individuals, though, because it does seem those on higher incomes or those that are wealthy are going to pay a bit more. What do you think? Because there's going to be a big discussion about this because it was in the manifesto. What is a working person to you?
Well, I mean, we represent, people working in supermarkets and in care homes. We represent people working, as I said before, in nuclear power stations. We represent people working in the creative industries. We represent professional footballers. So, I mean, there's a huge spectrum there. I think it's right, though, with the budget that the Chancellor asked those with the broader shoulders to pay a fair share.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. But the reason I say this is because apparently under this Treasury document that we've seen today, it is the top third of income earners, those that earn above 45,000, that are not considered necessarily to be protected working people. I mean, that's nurses, that's teachers, it's some police officers, it's train drivers. Surely they're working people.
Well, of course they're working people, and I think the Chancellor will have to look long and hard before she breaks any manifesto commitments. They did make that manifesto commitment not to put up taxes on working people. That's why I think, Darren, actually the focus should be on wealth. That's a real inequality in our society. I know full well there'll be people watching this programme tonight who don't feel well off if they're on £45,000 or £50,000 a year. But I also know this, we've got hundreds of thousands of members who are struggling to pay heating bills. And at the same time last year in the UK, we had a record year for supercars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Bugattis.
Yeah, but Paul, we can have this discussion time and again, though. We know this, you know this. When it gets to those types of people, they can leave. They're mobile. We live in a globalised world. They've shown they're already willing to do so. They can bob around between different countries with different rates of tax. They can employ people to sort out their tax. The problem is that there are people just below that who may be on the high end of the income scale, but they don't feel it, and they're the ones that are going to get clobbered again, aren't they?
Yeah, but Darren, we hear this every time that people talk about potential taxes on wealth. And remember, last year in the budget, the Chancellor did abolish the non-dom status. She did put VAT on private school fees. She did begin to equalise capital gains tax with income tax. She did put an increased levy on private jets.
Yeah, and many of those taxes have fallen.
We didn't see last year, Darren.
The revenue has fallen on some of those taxes because people have left.
No, Darren, that's not the case. Actually, the figures don't bear that out at all. Of course, there are some people who leave. The vast majority of wealthy people stay in this country because they believe in this country. They believe it's right to pay their taxes in this country, and they've built their lives and have their families in this country. So I actually think, I think asking those with the broadest shoulders to pay a little bit more is absolutely the right thing to do. And I also think it's important that the government looks at, for example, the windfall profits in the banks. I mean, our big four banks between them generate £1 billion in profit every single week in the first half of this year, mainly driven by the fact that we're in a high interest rates environment. A previous Conservative government.
The problem is, you talked about the orthodoxy of where we are as a British economy. The problem is we've got the highest tax burden this country's seen in generations. We've got low economic growth. That model isn't working. You're asking to increase taxes even more. The Prime Minister himself has said you can't tax your way to economic growth.
Well, no one believes that you can tax your way to economic growth, but those taxes are going to be absolutely vitally important in terms of rebuilding our public services that were underinvested in for 14 years and invested in our infrastructure that the people we represent desperately rely on, but also the companies and organisations that employ them as well. And I actually do think, Darren, when it comes to things like windfall taxes on the banks, listen, a previous Conservative government put a windfall tax on the energy companies when there was huge unexpected windfall profits. I don't think it's unfair or unreasonable to ask the banks to pay their fair share back to the British public either. Likewise, a proper tax on online gambling and gaming. These are the sort of things that will allow us to invest in public services and allow us to address the productivity problem.
Well, at least on that level, It does seem you'll probably get your way when it comes to the banks and the gambling, but we'll have to see what it means for workers and the rest of us. Paul, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot, Darren. Cheers.
OK, you're watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. After the break, the government says it will move asylum seekers to military bases as it tries to end the use of hotels. But the local MPs where the proposed sites are have hit out at the plans. We'll talk about that and more after the break. Welcome back. Now, the Home Office has confirmed that hundreds of migrants will be moved to military sites as the government tries to stop the use of asylum hotels. 2 sites, one in Inverness and one in East Sussex, could be used to temporarily house around 900 men. Our political correspondent, Mauro Aurora, has this report.
I'm determined that we will close those hotels. We're taking the action. I can't tell you how frustrated and angry I am that we've been left with a mess as big as this by the last government.
On Tuesday, the government faced another asylum setback. A damning new report showed the expected cost of housing asylum seekers tripling. In response, the PM doubled down on his pledge to end the use of asylum hotels. But what's the alternative? Well, maybe this. Cowborough Training Camp in East Sussex. Sky News understands the government hopes to begin moving up to 600 migrants here by the end of November.
It was the Conservative government that chose to stop processing applications from asylum seekers and then decided to put the backlog, the people, in hotels in populated areas. We can't now just throw all those people out on the street. It would cause chaos. So unfortunately, The Conservatives' policy will have to continue until we have prepared alternative sites, such as disused military bases.
However, in 2023, the National Audit Office said the use of large sites such as barracks like these could cost more and be higher risk than using hotels. Governments have tried to use alternative accommodation to reduce costs before. In 2023, the Conservatives housed asylum seekers on a barge called the Bibi Stockholm. It faced problems from the outset, and concerns over safety forced the government to send the asylum seekers back to hotels. It was later scrapped altogether by Labour. The second location in the government's plans is a barracks in Inverness. But the local Lib Dem MP is not happy.
If you just change the word from barracks to hotel, you get exactly the same issue. It takes 10 minutes to walk from this barracks into the centre of the town. And I think I know people in the area are going to be very uncomfortable about quite substantial blocks of young men from outside the area hanging around the shopping centre in the middle of the town.
And the MP for Sussex Weald is also against the plans. Nuz Ghani says, under the previous Conservative government, the Crowborough site was rejected outright. I will be seeking urgent answers from the Home Office and the Ministry of Defence. The government wants to urgently deliver on ending the use of asylum hotels, but reducing small boat crossings, something which has gone up instead of down since Labour came to power, is a contributing factor that is testing Labour's competency in government. Mari Aurora, Sky News, Westminster.
Christine, we heard from one of your colleagues there, not terribly happy, but if this saves money, isn't it a sensible proposition?
Well, the point Angus was making was, doesn't save money. You're really just changing one public expense for another, because
I would have thought these military bases would be cheaper than a hotel.
But you also have the expense of the military personnel have to go somewhere. This was used for Afghan refugees, and then the military moved back in, and now the military are moving back out for these refugees to go into it. Now, the problem is you're still spending vast amounts of public money. And what we need to do is find a cheaper, more effective way of doing it. And we need to get the asylum system back in working order.
Well,
the
just
delays and the backlog.
What is the cheaper alternative?
Well, Ed Davey has talked about Nightingale centres, setting up Nightingale-style centres where people would be processed very quickly, and we would find out quickly whether or not they were entitled to stay in this country. But one of the biggest problems, which was alluded to there, is the fact that the Conservatives stopped processing claims, and you got this massive backlog, and that's why you have so many people in this country at the moment. And I know from my constituency that just asylum claims are not being processed.
Quasi?
So look, the problem that the government has, and I think Angus, the Liberal Democrat MP, made the point very well, is that you've got, at the moment, I think something like 32,000 asylum seekers dotted around in hotels around the country, and that's not ideal. But if you concentrate...
It's less than ideal, it's costing billions of pounds.
There's a problem. If you concentrate 600 asylum seekers in East Sussex, as is being proposed, and 300 in Inverness. Yes, it's fewer communities that are being affected, but that's a huge number of people. And the communities that are affected will obviously there'll be a backlash, absolutely. The other thing I would say, particularly on this issue, is that, the asylum seekers are one issue, but of course we've got the small boats, and those numbers have gone up. So you've got all of that processing to do, and they can't say that, yes, well, the Tories did a bad job, but the numbers have then gone up.
But the problem is,
under their watch.
We're still sat here, there's a lot of people needing to be processed. Where do you put them?
So I think that I've always thought that having actually special built centres would be good. But of course, then, again, you've got the costs. And the irony of the whole thing... The irony of this whole thing is that the last government said, let's look at barracks. And Yvette Cooper was the one who said, well, they shouldn't do that, because that means that the policy has failed. And now she's resurrecting the policy of the last government.
We would get you two to agree on anything, but it does seem you may well agree on...
Seems quasi likes our policy on that.
But I don't have a whip now, so I can...
OK, you're watching The Politics Up here on Sky News with an element of unity here. Up next, we're going to be talking about our national debt.
Hello, dear. Just going to...
Yeah, that national great, of course, Prunella Scales, after her death at the age of 93. We'll be looking back at her contribution to the world of politics. She was a big Labour Party supporter, unlike, of course, John Cleese. Stay tuned.
Coming up on the UK Tonight from 8, we have a special report on the community in Wigan plagued by illegal waste, with 25,000 tonnes of rubbish deliberately dumped on residents' doorsteps. Also ahead, we'll be speaking to some of the British tourists caught up in Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica. And tributes tonight to Fawlty Towers actress Prunella Scales, who has died at the age of 93. All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
We're rolling. I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes. I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbours, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbours that harbour decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Welcome back to Sky News. We're just bringing you these live pictures. Just make out Kingston Harbour there in Jamaica that's been battered this afternoon, there this evening here by Hurricane Melissa. It has hit that island in the southwest as a Category 5 storm, wind speeds of up to 180 miles per hour, and they're expecting storm surges of around 4 metres. This, as you can see, is the storm right now. The eye of that storm Melissa, has passed over the island, but those winds are still battering the coastline there. We know that at least a third of the island has currently not got power, and that the winds are essentially so strong that people are being told to stay in place and to seek shelter. We'll have continued coverage of Hurricane Melissa throughout the evening here on Sky News. Now, sad news today because Fawlty Towers actress Prunella Scales has died at the age of 93. She was one of the most successful and probably popular comedy actresses of her generation. Best known, of course, for playing the long-suffering wife of Basil Fawlty opposite John Cleese in Fawlty Towers.
Sorry to bother you. I thought I'd better apologise for my husband's behaviour.
No, please, really, Mrs. Fawlty.
He's going through rather a disturbed time at the moment.
No, please, look, I don't quite understand. He does seem a bit worked up about something, but I'm sure there's some quite innocent explanation.
Basil?
Hi there, just
checking the doors.
Oh, it's still so good. But we also have to remember that she was interested in politics because she was a lifelong supporter of the Labour Party and actually appeared in a party political broadcast during the 2010 general election and this one from 2005.
The NHS expresses fundamental Labour values of fairness, of standing up for the many, not for the few, of the belief that healthcare is not a privilege to be paid for, but a right for all people.
On May the 5th, the choice will be in your hands.
We believe in the National Health Service. Keep it free. Sign our petition. Vote Labour.
That put her on the opposite side of the political divide to our fictional spouse in Fawlty Towers, of course, John Cleese, who was also taking part in party political broadcasts for the SDP Liberal Alliance back in 1987 and later the Lib Dems.
Well, here it is. The polls show that half of you, 1 of every 2 people watching this now, would vote for the Liberal Democrats if you thought we could win. I'll just say that again. Half of you prefer Lib Dem policies and would vote for us if you thought we could win. Now, do you see the problem? Because, of course, that means that if you did vote for us, we would win.
Well, as someone who follows John Cleese on social media these days, I'm not entirely sure he's still a Lib Dem. I don't know where his politics is. Because on this point, though, can I just ask about, like, whether you should show the same politics as your spouse, as your partner? Do you? Is that a thing? I don't know. Or do you disagree politically?
I have to tell you that my husband's politics, I didn't know. We were both journalists, and he never really gave away what he thought. I could figure it out from what he said, but he never really confirmed it. Now, I think there's no reason why you should agree with your partner because they have their own free mind, their own opinions. And as long as you don't fight about it.
Lead on some heated debates.
I think it's got a lot worse in the modern times today than it was in the past, where lots of people simply can't even have friends who disagree politically. But I think you should be able to, have a friendship or a relationship with someone who has different views.
I mean, I'm kind of of the opposite view, which is I want to politically disagree. I want to sit around the table and having a good old discussion, no?
Yeah, I think that was more common. I think now we're much more polarised and people tend to gravitate to other people who share their views.
Yeah, it is disappointing because I think actually kind of having a good, robust political discussion is quite entertaining. Anyway, we really appreciate your time. Kwasi Kwarteng, Christine Jardine, thank you very much indeed. And for a bit of unity tonight as well, unexpectedly, it must be said.
Wouldn't go that far.
OK, that is it for me tonight. Trevor Phillips is actually here tomorrow at 7 and back on Monday. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mead. Goodbye.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.